Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Lewis, product marketer for Zimbra, and with me today via audio is Phil Pearl, security architect for Zimbra Collaboration. Today we're going to talk about security and privacy, and specifically how you can improve these in your Zimbra Collaboration deployment. But before we go kind of into that, I want to discuss a little quickly some basic aspects of Zimbra Collaboration that I think make it a great addition for communication and information infrastructure. First, Zimbra Collaboration is an open source project, and it really provides kind of all of the communication pieces that you need, whether it's going to be chat, email, video, all that. Some of those are a little future looking, but at the core of the product, we've got web and non-web clients, a proxy, the mail transfer agent or MTA, and then the server itself. As an open source project, the community, the developer community, has access to the entire code base, which means they can review it and test it really at all times. This external feedback's great for making sure that we're patching holes properly, ensuring that there aren't backdoors in the code, and then just overall guaranteeing that the quality of the product is consistent throughout. A nice add for some of these users is an ability to add on custom modules and Zimlets, which we'll talk about later, and then an ability for, if an incident does occur, they can actually go in and do some quick patch work while they wait on the official patch to come out. Xmission actually did this when Heartbleed hit, and they said that they put a quick patch in place. A few hours later, they took our official one, and it really helped harden their entire infrastructure to what's often considered one of the worst incidences we've seen in quite a while. So we believe that the whole platform should be open. So whether we're talking about the utilization of components like MariaDB or OpenLDAP, standards like SMTP, TLS, SMIME, or just making sure that we're providing an open architecture that lets both us and our users extend the product and create an incredibly flexible product. So Phil, I've now given this obligatory marketing intro, but what, in your opinion, as the security guy, are the three most important aspects or features of the Zimbra Collaboration? No, I'm not talking about the Tetris thing that Jorge put out a few weeks ago, but for security and privacy, what do you think?
All right. There are three main or important aspects that we look at when we're talking about ZCS these days. Tends to be open source. We've been talking a lot about it, but the ability for others to go in and look at what's going on with the code. We have our public Bugzilla so people can see defects as they're logged and track those. And of course, we support all the standard protocols that an email platform would support. So we're open source and open standards, and that's a huge benefit. Of course, there's no guarantees that there are no bugs in our product or there aren't security issues, but it gives us the visibility that other people might not have with other products. Along with that, we've got the pluggable frameworks and modularity within the product to do customizations that, if you really are adventurous or just have a desire to do something unique and different that isn't part of maybe a typical system configuration or setup, you can go in there, you can write custom code, you can extend the server to do things that, you can be as creative as you like and work on the code to your heart's desires if you really want to. And that not only is part of just the general customization, but, for like back-end things, there's front-end customizations as well. So there's just a ton of flexibility there. And then lastly, when we talk about one of the things that we'd really want to be is we have this goal of being secure by default. So we've disabled the non-TLS protocols by default. If customers want them, they can still enable them, of course, but we don't want to promote using non secure protocols within the product. And we do that throughout the product these days. And of course, security is a constantly moving target, so we don't always have everything right and perfect, and that's understood that as things change, we need to make adjustments as well, as we're constantly doing that, constantly evolving configurations, making new settings available to customers so they can do specific tweaks to their environment that they feel are important to them as well. So with those three, that's probably the core of what I'd say are the most important aspects when I'm looking at things.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, Phil, based on that first slide I put up with some of the numbers around email, I don't see that email is going away anytime soon. In fact, it's clearly become what I would consider really a business-critical application, really for any connected business. But with that, I've got, now on the PowerPoint here, some interesting numbers around some incidences that occurred last year. Risk-based security, which is where I got some of these numbers, say that 1.1 billion records were exposed last year. I think Gemalto had a similar number to corroborate that. And risk-based analysis of like 3,000 breaches, they found that approximately 63% of them had exposed passwords, 51% had usernames, and 49% had email addresses. So it seems to me that digital identities are what the bad guys are going after right now, and that means it's probably a pretty decent point to start when you're looking at securing Zimbra collaboration. So let's kind of start there. Walk us through some of the important identity security features in your opinion.
Okay. Well, there are a few features that are pretty important here. I mean, when we're looking at authentication itself, we've got a number of options within the product. We have the core Open LDAP, and you can always do authentication directly against Open LDAP. But if for some reason you don't want that, so you've got some other corporate infrastructure or other authentication service that you're using, then you start to have other options that you can go and we can talk to external LDAP directly, and we can do authentication against some other LDAP directory. And you can even have it fall back to our directory if you want to allow some users to be in the external directory versus the internal directory. And then you can get more sophisticated still. You can configure SAML and have different policies set up for authenticating for your enterprise. You can also use OAuth as another option, and there's Kerberos and Shibboleth. And so there are a whole wide range of options out there, and some are easier to configure than others, obviously. But you're given a chance to work with what your infrastructure has, and you're not forced into a single option. And also to throw in a little teaser there, we're adding in support for the two-factor authentication within the next release of the product as well. So that'll give another option where it's native support within Zimbra for that instead of having to go externally for some. So that's just focusing on the authentication piece of that. But then if you're talking about strength of passwords and that sort of thing, we've got, of course, policies for managing passwords, and you can configure that within the product when you're looking just with authentication within Zimbra as well. So many options there.
Okay, very cool. What about, we've got that piece done. What about authorized access or permissions or any of those type things? Can you do those? And I assume they're in the product. I mean, given I wrote the white paper and it's in there, so give us a little insight on that.
Sure. We've got this notion of delegated admin within the product. So if you've got different teams of administrators that have only access or should only have access to certain types of data, or to only make certain types of changes within the platform, you can determine what those specific roles are, set up rules appropriate for those roles, and then provide an individual or a group of people basically the abilities to do the things that are important to their job while not giving them access to some of the other things that a global administrator might be able to do. And not only do you have that for administrators, but with things like distribution lists, you have the ability to delegate the administration of those distribution lists to whoever you designate as being the owner of those distribution lists. So users can have their own distribution lists that they can manage and maintain as well.
All right, very nice. Well, let's move on now. Assuming we get that piece right, and as you mentioned earlier, it's kind of always a moving target, but let's just say everything's static for a moment. Things like a next place to go would be securing the data that's within your infrastructure. So whether it's personal information for employees, partners, customers, intellectual property, trade secrets, maybe even it's just trying to keep that product strategy you've been working on for months secret. I know you and I have talked a lot about how there's lots of different layers here, and let's kind of role play a little and walk through a scenario. If, say, for instance, you and I were wanting to communicate securely, we chose to do, full-blown end-to-end encrypted email. What kind of some of the steps there that an end user and administrator may need to take to enable that?
Well, from the administrator perspective, there may not be a whole lot that you have to do if it's individual to individual. You're going to decide how you're going to communicate, if you're going to use PGP, if you're going to use SMIME. You can do some configuration for SMIME where you do certificates within the company that are published within a directory or something like that. Or you as an individual can go out and get your own SMIME certificate and manage that, import the certificate to your client, and you pick the client of your choice and pick the protocol of your choice, SMIME or PGP. If you do PGP, maybe you're going to generate your keys and publish the public keys out to some common directory. But once you've got that in place, then it's just a matter of using that client that you chose, creating the message, and then sending more or less as a normal email, except that you're going to designate in the client that this one's going to be an encrypted message or a signed message, and do just whatever's appropriate for the type of messaging that you decide to do.
Well, it sounds like a lot of the heavy lifting is done in the client. That's definitely not a bad thing. Let's kind of walk down the list here. DMARC and DKIM, I know those are not necessarily the newest of protocols, but they're increasing in adoption. In fact, Jorge De La Cruz actually put a great post up on the blog.zimbra.com, I think it was last week, on the topic. So if you're interested in more, definitely check that out. But as far as DMARC and DKIM, how are we handling those right now?
The core for DMARC, DKIM, and SPF really revolves around DNS configuration. So there's portions that you'll configure within a product. You can establish keys in Zimbra, and then basically as part of the Zimbra setup, it'll go through and tell you, okay, now you need to go and put certain information into DNS. And so you go and you generate your keys. You've got to publish that information in DNS. And once you've got that sort of information in place, then you start to enable the ecosystem that surrounds that. So you've got all the other third parties that are also supporting DKIM and DMARC. They can do validation of the information. So if you've got messages that are going out as signed, they can validate that these are messages that came from you versus somebody else trying to pretend that they're you. So that part of it enables you as being an authenticated sender. It's coming from your IP address, that sort of thing. And then when messages are coming in, what we've got in like the most recent versions of Zimbra, we can look at what the disposition is set for DMARC and what people are telling you to do with it. And so we can decide, well, does this look like spam based on the rules? Yes, it does throw this into the spam filter. So it's not complete DMARC support at this point, but it's basically dealing with the handling it. Does it look like spam or does it not look like spam type of thing.
Okay. And next bullet, in-transit encryption. I know this is one you and I have talked a lot about, and that really goes to our secure by default discussion. Walk through from whether you want to talk from kind of the MTA up or the server up, kind of how we approach in-transit encryption within the product set.
Okay. So, when we started out, I was mentioning that your goal is secure by default. So we've enabled TLS across the board for communications within the platform, but it goes beyond that. So opportunistic TLS is enabled within the MTA. So we'll talk TLS to any other MTAs out there that also want to talk over TLS instead of in the clear. And so that's when you're trying to get to that end-to-end encryption of the data, so that part of it is handled once you've got other MTAs out there that are willing to speak TLS as well. And there's been a strong push to do that with large service providers as well as smaller companies out there as well. There's just been a strong movement to enable that across the board with all the changes that have been going on recently. So, I mean, that starts from the client side. You're talking SMTP over TLS. When you're reading email, it's IMAP, POP all over TLS or SSL, depending on how you've configured things. And it goes all the way across the board.
Yeah. All right. And then, another additional layer to this kind of onion we've got going here is AVAS, so antivirus, anti-spam. I know it ships, I think, a Mavis AD, Clam AV, Spam Assassin. Walk through kind of those three without getting too much into additional layers because we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but walk through that just a second for me.
Okay. Yeah, the open source components that we've got are Mavis DNU, Clam AV, and Spam Assassin, as you mentioned. So those three components are the core of handling anti-spam and antivirus for us. What you have is you've got a default configuration that'll get you a decent solution, but you can go further. We've got a wiki article published on how to go in and set up RBLs, so you can basically cut off spam before it even comes into the system. Once it gets into the anti-spam and antivirus part of Zimbra, that's basically going to say, does this get quarantined, does it go to your spam folder, or does it get delivered because it's clean? And that's the core of it, I guess.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a blog maybe in the next week or two about that topic specifically too. So, all right, so far we've covered identity security, information security and protection. And, this is all great, absolutely needed information for our audience, but, how or where do we administer all this?
Well, the place that anybody that's new to Zimbra will start will be the admin UI. It's got access to almost all configuration settings. And so you can go in, get familiar with the product, and get the things that you can tune and tweak. And there are many, many things that you can play with. So the admin UI breaks it down into different components and gives you visibility into the various things that are there.
Mm-hmm. From your perspective, would you start there? Is there some wiki stuff you'd start on? I mean, what's probably the most important first step for a new administrator, you think?
The admin guide is a great place to start to just get background information. Once you're ready to dig in, go straight into the admin UI, start playing with things, get familiar with what the settings are and what they do. You can mouse over settings and get a little pop-up that gives a description of what they're intended to be used for. And so if the key by itself or the general description is enough, you can get more information pretty easily there. And once you're ready to go beyond just the GUI and you really want to dig in, you can always go to the command line or the APIs and start playing with it that way as well. But until you spend some time, often you'll just go into the admin UI and discover from there.
Okay. So I see on our list here we've got ActiveSync. I assume that's also available in the admin UI?
Yes, we've got a large set of policies that are available with ActiveSync, and so you can go in and start tuning and tweaking all your favorite ActiveSync policies directly from the admin UI.
Okay, cool. So I know a lot of security experts and people in that industry usually say that it's not a matter of when a breach is going to happen, but if. So as a Zimbra collaboration administrator, what would be some of the steps you would take to try to mitigate some of that risk associated with some data exposure stuff?
The first place that you there's a couple of things you do. I mean, we've got logs where you can go in and start to see what's going on, the various events that have taken place. If you know that you've got an account that's been compromised, then you can go and reset passwords, lock out the account. You can do a number of things there. If the person or the account that's been compromised has devices that are associated with ActiveSync, then you can go in and do some. The end user could go and do a remote wipe of the device itself if you've configured the ActiveSync policies such that if someone tries to log into the device X number of times, or you define the number of times, you can have the device do a local wipe by itself as well if you had the policy in place. So those cases are handled that handles the individual accounts that are compromised. Looking also at like bigger picture things, we have what's called like a denial of service filter that lets you look at rate limiting various types of requests that come into the system either by IP or by account. And you've also got other tunables that basically give you control over how to or when to lock out an account if too many logins have been attempted, that sort of thing, to slow down account harvesting and other related types of attacks.
Well, it sounds like it's pretty granular if you want it to be. So I want to wrap up our chat on a topic we've been discussing a pretty fair bit lately in the media. Should have some articles coming out soon. That being, how an open source ecosystem can really help drive advancement in innovation and value creation. Kind of the way I think of it is how it boils down is you can extend Zimbra collaboration and really increase both the platform's value and what you can do with it from a functional standpoint. I know there's kind of two pretty straightforward approaches here with the product. It's whether it's an MTA level integration or a Zimlet. Obviously, a Zimlet's kind of our own name for it, but give me a quick explanation for kind of what those two approaches are, and then some examples of ways you can apply these approaches to help improve security and privacy for Zimbra collaboration.
All right. The MTA level integration has a couple of different ways you can approach it, but the simplest perhaps is when you're looking at these SaaS platforms that'll basically do the front end anti-spam antivirus protection for you. So you can outsource that work if you're not comfortable maintaining the own setup that we have within Zimbra, or you want additional levels of protection out there. We've got a partner MailGuard that will do this as a SaaS service. You basically set them up with as the mail exchanger for your domains, and mail comes into them first so they can do protection for you. And that's a great option when you're looking to just have a rock solid solution there, but really don't want to have to deal with the management and maintenance of that sort of thing. But if you decide that you want to own it and you want to go deeper into it, you can go in as far as taking and swapping out our MTAs with your own MTAs. Or if you don't want to go quite that far, you can put your own MTAs in front of our MTAs. Instead of doing this as a SaaS service, you're now just implementing it yourself and using the MTA of your choice and doing any filtering and any custom rules that you want to put in place at the MTA level there. So you've got a lot of flexibility there. And you can even do that for compliance and other things if you've got specific appliances that you use that are required for the businesses that you're in to capture certain types of information. You can use that level of integration with your MTAs where you have custom routing policies, custom decision making that is done at the MTA level that's done outside of Zimbra if you don't want to be dealing with that or handling that within the Zimbra platform itself. And if you want to go more fine-grained, you can even do things like filters that you can add into Zimbra that do specific things beyond that, something that the product might do. So there's a lot of options there. But when you do replace the MTAs, things you have to do, you have to understand how to look up users within our LDAP and how to route messages appropriately. So it takes a fair amount of knowledge to do something like that. So you pick and choose based off of what you're comfortable with. And then going from the MTA stuff over to the Zimbra side, the Zimbra typically are thought of as just the customization to the web client front end. There's an ability also to do some customization of the admin interface and the back end, the admin UI. So you can, at the simplest level, just make tweaks and changes to the admin UI. But if you want to get a little bit more fancy, you can do things like PGP messaging from the browser. That's a great example of a work that's been done recently out open source. And then you can also just do some other custom rules. Say you can highlight that a message may appear to be a phishing message or something like that. You can do just about anything you can dream of. You can do with the Zimlet as long as you've got the interest, the capabilities to do the programming and the desire to dig into the code, because we've got established APIs, and then you can dig in beyond the established APIs into the client code itself and do a lot of different things if you're really into doing some interesting customizations. So, and then if you take that to the admin side, you can extend, not just the admin side, but you can extend the server writing Java code. You can create your own custom handlers for the service to do many different things beyond just what we already do with the server. So you can talk and interface with other third-party systems via the back-end handler that you create to do whatever you like. It's up to your imagination, really.
Well, so we can play Tetris or we can secure the product. All sounds good to me. Well, with that, I think we finish up. And really, I just want to emphasize again that this is a critical component for businesses today, especially those that are in multiple nations that have a pretty distributed infrastructure. And really understanding kind of the ins and outs of how Zimbra collaboration handles security and privacy, and then what the additional kind of features that Phil just mentioned, for example, are available to you, be it OpenPGP, Zimlets, or a Mailguard type MTA level thing. So if you want any more information, dive a little deeper into the discussion today, you can head over to the Resource Center at Zimbra.com and download our latest Zimbra Security and Privacy white paper. It's called Protecting Your Zimbra Collaboration Ecosystem or Environment. And in it, you can provide some additional links and resources. I really think it'll be a pretty good read for anyone interested in the product. With that, I think we call it a wrap for the day. And thanks, Phil, for your time. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Cheers.
Thank you.